Good evening, everyone. This is your host again, Gueh, and as promised, he is back. He is back in the house. He is back in the house. Dr. Gray, you are welcome. You need no more introduction.
Yes, I'm
You,
home. I'm home. I'm home. I'm
yes,
home.
yes, yes, yes. You hit it out of the ballpark. Last time you were on the show, the first show, you were the one, and it made such a huge impact. I want to welcome you back on the show again.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
what
Thank you
what
so
have you been up to with the family, the kids, and stuff like that? What's going on? Everybody, I know my
thank you.
nephew is in college. How's that transition?
Oh man, that man is a big man in college. He's doing his thing. So he
Yes,
freshman year
yes,
at Kennesaw State. So he's stepping into the world of adulthood. So he's doing his thing, man.
that
And then
is
you know,
awesome.
our baby Christian is still with us in 10th grade, running track, doing his thing.
Doing
So
his thing.
listen,
That
we
that dude is running like what? You said like 13 or 11 on the 100 dash.
11.
What's his
He's
time?
running, yeah, 11.7 on the 100-meter dash, and he's about 23, 23 something in the 200. And now
Yeah,
he's doing,
that's. I mean,
um,
if you really look at it, like them dudes are running like nine, you know,
right.
times, and so he's just in high school. He ain't even hit college yet.
Well, and he's only a 10th grader, so he still
That
have 2 more years
still
in high
got
school.
4 years. So
Yeah,
by the time he get up into college, you can arguably say he about to give Hussein Bolt a little run for his money on his time.
that's what
So
I
that's
got.
yeah.
Let him bring some using boat money into this family. That's what we're looking for. So all your
But
all your
hey, don't be chasing. We ain't saying I be running behind
man,
Cheetah and Cecil bring some of that.
now you're running. Just bring some of that money back. Help us with the school fees. Help her with that, with some of that
I am
scholarship.
running
Scholarship. We're looking for scholarship,
stuff looking for
man.
scholarship. Oh
But
my
Kay,
God.
it's been great, man. Yeah, I've been the last few months. I've been in the trenches, with doing a lot of trainings. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But
Yes,
this
yes.
thing, I can't thank you enough putting a spotlight on this topic of mental health,
Mm,
suicide, our health, our own personal, spiritual health, so the
yeah,
spotlight is indeed necessary.
yeah.
So much right now, so many people suffering in silence, man, and the pain is there. We put on the mask every day, we put on the trimmings of the good clothes, folks thinking we show our social media highlights. Yeah, they say that person doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Not knowing
When the
that
light,
dying is.
yeah, when the light go off, people are suffering. So just thank you so much for just speaking the truth to power, as we
Yeah.
engage in this conversation.
And as you said it's not just from my just being in this field now, it's not just one group or one gender, men, older, younger, women, because before mental health or depression, things like that were kind of associated with women. Uh, you know, for whatever reason, women, because we talk and share more.
Mhm.
So the data, the data is actually off because when I say off, because men are not reporting this.
Yes.
Men, yeah, men are not reporting it because of stigma. So you see the women. So now we just got more statistic on the women mental health and on abuse. But a lot of men are being abused, have suffered abuse in their childhood, dealing with it in their adulthood and stuff like that. So did you see that as well?
Oh, absolutely. You nailed it. There's the data is absolutely, I mean, there's more growing data now on it being reported, but yes, a lot of males just historically are not reporting those things. I was just
Mm,
talking to one of my sisters who does a lot of intimate partner violence work, right? So,
mm,
and in her work, she
mhm.
she said yes, is typically males who are the perpetrator, but she said there's a lot of males also, are the victims of partner violence. But she
Wow.
for imagine a man that comes to, oh, my wife beats me. Or
They will say, "Man, you're foolish. What kind of trip is this? Which woman beat you?"
right. So men are not that, it's when even just saying it comes off comical, right? Just that's how society's put this in society,
Yeah,
create this narrative that
yeah,
it either shouldn't be happening or either can
yes,
happen or is something
yes,
that doesn't happen.
yeah,
But she said there are some men who come and report it. Oftentimes they meet resistance because people don't believe them. Even with bruises on them, law
wow.
enforcement won't
Oh,
believe them. They would
are
try
you
to
serious?
twist the story that these men were actually the instigator to the violence, to the domestic violence. And that's what she's saying in her role. So it's a great topic to just shine more light on because a lot of brothers are not, reporting that. And then the other piece of the lack of reporting, particularly when we look at suicide, the research says that men die by suicide more of using fatal means. So what that means
Oh,
is you got men who will use weapons, guns, X, Y, and Z, but then also you have men who are driving their vehicles into trees or into poles or accident. But when they go to the hospital, when they report on a death certificate, it is an accident. It's not a suicide. So you have the lack of reporting there as well. And I know I've had legit conversations with men
oh,
who have told
Jesus.
me straight up, Bobby, that I was so suicidal. I just wanted to drive 110 on the highway and just
Off the
run my
bridge.
car off the road. These are men talking about their experiences.
What are causing these men to get to this breaking point?
Man, so let me get a little bit theoretical and then we can expand and then we'll
Yeah,
get
yeah, absolutely. It looked like we just went straight for the meat. Like,
let that we don't need no appetizer. Let that get to the main course. Straight
yes,
up.
sir. We are right in the meat.
Let's just go straight for the food. I don't want no
Almost-
salad.
oh, give me no
Yeah,
little horror doors. What I call it? Horror door.
hors d'oeuvre. So, I don't want no grass here, no salad. Let give me straight meat
Give
and
me straight
potatoes.
to meat.
That's
Wow.
a great question, Kate. So your question is like why and how are men, not just men, just people, period,
Right.
that are
How
getting
are
to
we
the
getting to
point
this?
of suicide. I want to take my life. I can't take it anymore.
Mm,
So there is a theoretical framework that we use when we're doing a training
mm,
called interpersonal theory of suicide. And this was created by Thomas Joyner many years ago. So Thomas Joyner uh, was someone who invested in this topic because he had a personal experience with suicide. His father, and in his story, the signs were there for his father, but back then, you're talking about decades ago, people weren't paying attention to the signs, right? So again, how do we get here? The signs are there, but if we're not knowledgeable about the signs, we ignore them. When he
mm,
created this framework, he said there are three main things, three main components that must all come together for someone to get to the point of wanting to die by suicide or wanting to take their life. Number one, the first one is a concept he called thwarted belongingness. And what that means is someone who don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they belong with their family. They don't feel like they belong in social networks. They don't have that sense of belonging for whatever reasons. And again, we can go deeper into that. But
wow, wow, wow.
someone not having that sense of belonging, what give us every human being wants that sense of belonging,
That's
right?
it.
You have people either join in sports, you got that sense of belonging, you're in some type of religious or social affiliation, sense of, so that's something human nature we desire. So Joyner says the first thing is that breakdown of someone belonging. It's what he called thwarted belongingness. So you don't feel like you belong.
Mm-hmm.
The other psychological piece he brings up is perceived burdensomeness. Understand? Perceived.
Perceived burdensomeness.
Key word, perceived.
Yeah.
You have this thwarted belongingness, which is all shaky and rocky. You don't feel like you belong. Then the other psychological component is you start to have this perception that you are a burden on somebody. You are a burden on your family. You are a burden on your spouse. You are a burden for your children. You are a burden on whatever space, environment, community that you're in. So he says those are the two psychological components. So not feeling like you belong and then feeling like you are a burden. So those two psychological components can stand alone, and you may have what we call suicide ideation.
Ideations.
The ideation,
yeah.
the ideation is the thoughts, right? You may not actually have a plan. You may not actually have a thought of doing of going through with it, having actions, but you're having these pervasive thoughts constantly. Underneath that could be depression. It could be anxiety. It could be those little voices in your head, like just wanting to give up. Make sense so far?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you have these thoughts. That's the ideation.
Mm-hmm.
So Joyner says you can have these ideation, but where it moves from the ideation to actually action, the third component is something he called capability. Capability. What does he mean? Capability means that there is either a biological or environmental habituation that you have developed as a person to tolerate pain. Ooh. So, right, it gets a little heavy. So the capability is this habituation to pain. So people doing risky things like skydiving, people who are doing risky things like driving 110 down with no care. Again, in that you will have people who are substance abusers, somebody who can experience any kind of physical pain, even if you break. I get a little paper cut. I would be crying, asking my wife to put Band-Aid on it. So, you know, yes. So Joyner says that capability piece is the linchpin with those two psychological things. When those three things come together, that's where we see people who actually either they actually go through it and attempt to kill themselves, or actually get to a point of putting this actual plan together, right? And that's when you look at those big terms and that the theoretical framework. When I teach it, I always ask, like, which one of those components you can relate to. And most people talk about that thwarted belongingness. Sometimes you don't feel like you belong. Some people talk about everybody. Some of my students or some folks we training, they talk about sometimes I do feel like I'm a burden on people. You know, so you have this perceived burdensomeness, and then you start to look at the capability piece, and we can even expand that to people who are kind of engaging collecting weapons. They don't care about those things. You know, they can collect weapons, and just having the means and the way and means to execute whatever plan they have to take their life. You know, but that capability piece is something that's very critical to pay attention to as well, because if we're not paying attention to those signs of belongingness, if we're not, or people who feel like they don't belong, and I work with kids over 20 something years, Kay, I can't tell you how many kids I've dealt with who felt like they didn't belong. And those things are some of the preceding thoughts, mindsets, behaviors,
Right,
and actions
right.
that lead up to suicide ideation. And unfortunately, for some people, death by suicide.
I want to unpack this in smaller fragments. Let's
Yeah.
take that, the sense of belonging. I want to unpack it in smaller pieces because it's very important for people to understand the process on how we get there. As you were explaining to me, it lets me to conclude then suicide is not something that is a knee-jerk decision. Like it's
Absolutely not.
somebody just get up. You know how you get vexed, slap somebody right away, boom, whatever. It is calculative, it's a pre-existing thought process that is lingering on and then gets to the point where now it develops into this capability when you start fascinating about and not
Yeah.
fearing death at this point.
There it is. Not you use the term exactly. That's actually
Yeah,
that fearlessness of death. That's the term we actually use when we're doing
yeah.
training.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
You know, I want to unpack this because in your first prompt, where people don't feel like they belong. Okay, that's okay. When you threw it out there, maybe you might get a majority of the room raising their hand. So at some point in our lives, we feel we don't belong,
Yeah.
right? Either you, right, either you've been on a team, you just joined the group, and then maybe there are some old people in the room. You're just trying to find a way, fit your way in. How do we move past that? Because we figure, okay, that perception can pretty much be anybody at any time.
Yeah.
Not belonging in a family, you get a new baby in the family, hey, I don't feel like I belong here because everybody's doting on this new baby. I've joined
Yeah.
a new team, nobody wants to talk to me or a new place. Okay, how do we get past to the point now where we're going to that second phase of that it's not normal anymore. You're obsessing over the fact that you don't belong in this space, or that demon or that spirit is now in your head, where you're not just feeling I don't belong in this space, but everywhere you go now, you're trying to validate yourself against that thing.
Yeah.
Is that sort of like the process?
Man,
Starting.
Kay, that's so critical because whose responsibility is it for every human being to have a sense of belongingness? Let me throw that question to you. Whose responsibility is it for
I never
every
thought
human?
about listen, I never thought about it. I think we make other people be responsible for that. Like generally, you go into a new place, you want everybody to hug you, welcome you, do this, or else you feel like, okay, they don't want me here. I don't know. I never thought about that.
So that's an interesting concept and something to like dig deep into. Who's responsible? So we are in the United States of America. The United States of America is a very individualistic society.
Mm-hmm.
It's not communal. Even when
Right.
we think about the concept of self-care, self-care in itself is selfish. It's a
Yeah.
westernized concept. You
Mm-hmm.
know, how often do we talk about community care? When we focus, so there's what they call around the globe, there's a concept called the blue zone. So there's about
Mm.
5 or 6 blue zones in the world, and they're identified blue zones because the average age of death is in the 90s. So these people live up to 90s, in their 90s and beyond.
Right.
So the research was what happened. How are these people living so long in parts of
Uh-huh.
Japan and some other cultures around the globe? And what they found was because they had a concept of community care. It was not about self. So everything was communal. So that means that people were checking on you. People was
Mm.
the fabric of the culture was so tight that from birth to death, there was that community care that was
Yeah.
collectively around you as you were growing up as a kid, all the way to your golden years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that sense of belonging, it has to be created by society, Kay, in my opinion. We have to
Right.
create a welcoming space in all, even churches.
Oh,
Let's think about churches. Why do you think people don't go to church?
yeah, and it's funny that it's even becoming more evident and in churches and more noticeable in churches. Somebody who
100%.
that doesn't look the part, nobody pays attention to them. They're trying to find where to sit. Ushers are sitting them in a specific area in the back because they can't be among. Wow, that is so sad.
There's the cancer of elitism is something that create or create spaces that are very exclusive. So people don't have a sense of belonging in these spaces. People, they
I
go to church,
guarantee.
they don't feel like they belong. We have kids who
No,
go to
I
school.
guarantee you, any elite church or who consider themselves, I guarantee you, if you did a statistic, if somebody walked in that church looking, not looking the part, they will
Right.
never get a seat up front. You can
Never.
do a 10, I dare any church I'm talking to that if anybody walks in your church looking shabby, maybe smelly, or don't look the part, that your ushers will walk that person up front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's
That is sad, yo.
100%. So
Bruh.
to answer your question, it is up to us, everybody. Everybody. It's up to everybody to create an environment of belonging for everyone, even our homes. Starting with our homes, or do all our family, our children, they should feel like they belong to this family. Let's just start with
Yeah,
our home.
yeah,
Then we
yeah,
go out to our community, our immediate community, our schools, our churches, our political structures within the local community. Do you
yeah.
have a voice? Do you feel like you have a voice? Do you feel like you're ignored? So it is a big concept, but to answer that question, it takes everyone that to be intentional to create a sense of belonging. And unfortunately, we are in spaces where there's a lot of elitism. There is a lot of exclusion, and people are not included. And it could be because of their identities that they bring. And that's a whole nother layer of conversation there as well.
Conversation, but we are human beings, so you're right. I think creating that space, and that's why you see if a mother had a younger child, a baby, they make efforts to make that child who was the youngest
Yeah.
to feel like you still belong. They might take time out because they understand that immediately that child began to now say, where's my space in this
Well,
family? So
so
right, I mean,
I love that you bring that up. It brought a thought to me, and we've made jokes about it for a long time because I'm kind of like the middle child, right? So we know when we're small, I felt like the one that was kind of left out, growing up.
Because Daniel was like, listen, he was the terror. Like he would command the attention. He was loud. Everybody knew he was up. He made sure everybody attended to him. I by default got the respect because I was the first. So by default, I was first. That's my default across the board.
Yeah.
By default, the baby gets to be spoiled.
Yep. So what happened to me?
Who are you again?
Really? That's why you remember when we're kids, somebody put me on the fence in the backyard and they left me there for hours.
Yo, listen, I put you on the fence, and it was like, for those of you who don't understand, our house was fenced, and in the back of the house, I put Bobby on the fence, and then after we were playing and stuff like that, we left Bobby on the fence. Mind you, we forgot about Bobby on the fence. When the parents got home, they didn't realize Bobby was not there. And came to bath time. That where is he? He's still sitting out.
Nighttime, that guy still sitting on the fence.
That guy still keep on the fence like that. Because you have to sit on the fence like that.
I'm like 5 years old, right? I'm like 5. I can't remember, man. But you know what? That's such a another piece for us to unpack and even be aware of our children. They too, will go through that process of not feeling like they belong within the family, right?
Yeah.
So all those things fester, Kay. So that and that's Joyner, his theory. I mean, it's has some critiques. Obviously, every theory has its critiques, but it makes so much sense when you start
Yeah.
putting the pieces and dive it into it a little bit, because we all want that sense of belonging, and it happens at some situations where we either don't have it, or spaces are not created for us to feel that sense of belonging.
So then we
So
move on. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so if we unpack, so how we address that
Right.
belongingness, again, it has to be an intentional, is the responsibility for all of us. So creating community, any influence we have, the work you do, again, this is one person can't do it, but the work you do, Kayla, you are one of your strength is creating community. You have that natural knack of bringing people together. Someone meet you for the first time, they just feel connected to you. So those things are skills that God has given you, that will help create a broader community. You have people across the globe in this ministry. That's a community they feel like they belong to. So God is using you in a mighty way to create that type of community. So that's one piece that's very helpful, in small or large spaces, how we can create those community for people to feel like they belong. Family, just talking to family, educating family, like I mentioned, speaking to family on some of those small nuances of their own kids feeling like a sense of belonging. Because to your point again, people are not waking up just one day feeling like they want to take their life. It's festering over time. So be intentional, family, making sure that, I don't care, when we were younger, our mom did family meetings every month. If you like it or not, you go into that family meeting. But it's a great way to just do a pulse check and let everybody speak in that family meeting. Sense of belonging, right? Family, going to your children games. If they're involved in different things, go and support them. They feel that sense of belonging. I have the opportunity to run a nonprofit here, the nonprofit we run, and the boys in our program, that was when we were putting it together and I was collaborating with the school. They were asking me, Dr. Gueh, what type of kids you want? I said, I want those kids who don't feel like they belong. That's the word that I use when we're identifying boys to be in that program. I don't care if they got a 4.0 or a 1.0. If there are kids who feeling like they don't belong, those are the kids that I want. So you just be intentional in the different spaces of creating those things. Now, perceived burdensomeness.
That one is pretty heavy.
It is. Perceived burdensomeness is very. The key word is perceived. Someone getting to a point where they feel like they're burdened. Underneath that, understand there could be some clinical mental health issues going on, depression, anxiety. So those things are there. Some people get to the point of perceived burdensomeness if they feel there could be some financial challenges. Men, I'm speaking on behalf of men. Men who they're dealing with a loss of job, can't find a job. You have some of our brothers, who are struggling just to make ends meet. You see a lot of men who struggle with this part, that perceived burdensomeness. And and again, it's not just men, women as well. Kids feel that sense of burdensomeness. You feel like, if I stay around, it's creating more hardship for my family. They would be better off without me. So that's the talk. That's the self-talk that's going in that person's head.
Heads, yeah.
They and they're not they may not even talk about them. They would say they are better off without me, right? So that's the language that they're using when they're having those psychological thoughts of perceive.
Wow.
So how do we combat it? It takes, I believe in language. We got to start having language to thoughts that we have. Our big issue is we don't have language to these thoughts. We just don't, unless you are specific, unless you are either trained, unless you have the privilege to learn these things, but I've had students over the years who wanted to go to a certain college. They couldn't get into that college. I've had students over the years who were dealing with, I can't go to college because that'll be a burden to my family.
That'll be a burden to my family. I've heard that one.
It's creating that concept that you are a burden.
Now, how do we just let me just park right there for a second, because this is a very important dynamic, or at least conversation. Somebody say the statement, I think you'll be better. And we will get into the spotting of these signs when someone's talking like that. Once in a while, you might have language just dropped around,
yep.
Although they're not acting, but they might start saying stuff in reference to that. Yeah. And I've heard responses, especially on the flip side of it, when men might say that, or women might say this, if you have low self-esteem, that's not my responsibility, because we are minimizing that spirit is growing in that person when they're speaking like that. But when they speak like that, then we look at them as they're either having some self-esteem challenges within themselves. We're not, that's your problem, because obviously you're not thinking that's a problem I created. I can't help if you lost your job, and you don't have anything. I'm the one and you are ungrateful. The thing that I'm here paying these bills, doing everything, and you're sitting here thinking that way. You know what I mean? So how do we respond? Because I'm sure you will get into later on spotting the signs, because that's a sign when someone is speaking like that. How do you then, since we raise it up, respond to the typical conversation that someone might have and say that?
Well, so thoughts always go to action. Thoughts always turn to action. So if we just having a common conversation, let's just put it in layman's term, me and you talking, and you start to talk about feeling like you're a burden to your family. Mm-hmm. So you start throwing words like, Bobby, man, things just been hard. I've been it's just so much going on. The kids getting ready to go to school. Financially, things are, I'm just dealing with so much. I feel sometimes like I'm a burden, to the family. So for me, if I was having that just general conversation with someone,
right.
I would first ask why. You don't want to just assume. So you want to know the why. So the why, they can dig deep into, well, I don't feel like I'm enough. I don't feel like I'm worthy. So these language, that's the language they're throwing out to me. And in one of the trainings that we do, we specifically, and this is moving into this training that we do is called the ASSIST model, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. And I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I think it's a critical piece when you start hearing those things. Okay. So I want everybody to get this. Everybody out there, y'all get this.
Everybody listen, put your ears on. That will help you determine, this person is thinking a little deeper into this or just venting.
There it is. So, I don't feel like doing this thing. I'm just tired. I don't feel like I belong. I'm a burden on the family. They throw these things. So I would say something like, Okay, what you're telling me, I've worked with people, or when people are saying those type of things, it sounds like they want to commit suicide. When you're saying you don't want to be here, you're feeling burdened, like you're burdened, you're feeling like you're not worthwhile. It seems like, are you talking about suicide?
Mm.
The critical thing about that, a lot of people are afraid to use the word suicide.
Of
That
course.
that's the part I want us to catch, because it's the stigma, it's the taboo to use those words explicitly. So we train in the training, we train people. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Like, you have to be
Yeah.
direct.
Oh wow,
You have to
really?
be clear. And in the training, people will even ask me, or ask us, well, if suppose I say, well, are you thinking of harming yourself? That's not harming yourself, is very vague. If someone is in a very traumatic or at that point in their life, they're like, nah, I'm not just thinking about harming myself, I want to die. And I've had people in experience who have said that. I'm not just thinking about cutting myself or harming myself, I want to die. Because if I die, it's going to solve X, Y, and Z problems. So those little nuggets, in some training we say nuggets. They're giving you these little nuggets, these signs. I don't want to be here. In with kids would say stuff like, I don't want to be here. Then you have to explore. What do you mean, I don't want to be here? Right? Do you not want to be here anymore? Even there's developmentally, we even do training for little kids. I've had kids as little as first, second grade who are suicidal. So you have to be developmentally appropriate in how you talk to them about death and dying, right? So you have to be clear with the finality of death with little kids. But let's bring it back up with the adults. If I had a friend, one of my buddy, and again, we're having this dialogue and they're just throwing these nuggets to me. I'm tired. I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm a burden to people. I would ask them that question straight up. And that's the biggest takeaway I want everybody to take away.
Wow,
if you feel like someone is throwing those different
deep.
signs and saying those different things to you, ask them that question. Are you talking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Yes or no, then it would give you kind of the next step where to go with it, right? Yes, I am. If it's yes, then you want to hear the story. You want to hear, okay, how did this person get to this point? How did they get to this point? So talk to me, talk to me a little more. How did we get here? How did you get here?
How did you get here?
And listen to their story, because it's this first time this person have said it out loud that they're thinking of taking their life. So it's a powerful moment not to jump straight to, oh, I got to save this person. We got to call 911. No. The mere, so yeah. The way we metaphorically tell folks and train folks is like, once somebody tell you they're suicidal, you're jumping in the river with them. So you jump in the river with that person and hear their story. How did they get to this point? And as they're telling you how they got to this point, the hope is you start to find some life connections. I believe there's always life connections. Always. There was a huge meta research done, over 1,500 articles. That's huge. Done. This research was done on people who actually attempted, but they lived. What they found is the people who actually lived, they said the minute they actually executed the attempt, either jumping off a bridge and they lived, gunshot wound and they lived, whatever, and they lived, they said they had this strong desire to live and didn't want to die anymore. They felt like, man, this fear of death came upon them, that they knew that they wanted to live after that attempt.
They don't try to attempt it again.
No, that's not the case.
Okay.
There's the research that those folks, there are some folks who still try to attempt again, but that's where interventions have to happen. Those people who survive those attempts, extreme interventions have to be in place. Professional interventions have to be in place.
What are life connections before we stray too far from the thought?
Yeah. Say you broke off a little bit, Karen.
Oh, okay, yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go ahead, repeat it.
Okay, I said, what are life connections? Because you hit the thought, you hit
good
the
question. So life connections, man, that concept of life connection, and this is, for me, this is where the ministry is, okay? Because when I'm working with folks, and I've worked with folks who were suicidal, and when we talking, I look for a life connection. That life connection could be something as small as, hey, you know what? You're here talking to me. You're here talking to me.
Oh.
And a life connection could be someone who, as you're hearing their story, they start talking about their pet. And in that moment, you see their language start to change from the past to the present, right? Most people that are thinking of dying, they're not thinking future. They're in the past. They're in the present. Their foot is like dancing between the past and the present. They're not thinking future at all. But then if I'm having that conversation and this person, and I'm using this example, start talking about, man, me and my kids were supposed to go to a vacation to Disney cruise in 2 years. I will explore that. Is that a life connection? Is this person, are they wanting to do this thing so much with their kids? Life connection could be something that, just like that light bulb, if we want to use that term, light bulb. Life connection could be that ray of hope that somebody get as you're hearing, but folks don't get there if they don't have anybody listening to them, Kay. So that's why
I remember you telling me about a story about a young lady you met on the airline. I think her father had died.
Oh my gosh, that was one of the most powerful moments in my life.
Yeah, so when you're talking about a life connection, I was like, that made me think of that story.
In that moment, I was that girl's, I wasn't necessarily her life connection. Because her brother died. Mm-hmm. She was trapped, and I met this woman, this girl, in the airport in transit. We were laid over in London, and I'm laid over. She lay over. She's traveling back home to her brother's funeral in Belgium. Wow. Just so happens she sits right in front of me. Out of hundreds and thousands of people in that airport, God put me and that girl right in front of each other. And I'm sitting there kind of minding my business, and I can look at her body language, and we kind of made eye contact, and I said, hey. She said, hey, and her head went down. And I'm like, you okay? Just my natural, I just asked her if she's okay.
Right, that's why we got to know these things, to know how to reach people. Yeah. Oh my God.
Are you okay? It wasn't so much of a therapeutic instinct or counseling instinct. It was just humanity. Right. I asked her, is she okay? And this girl just went on sharing with me that her brother died. She was flying back to Belgium for the funeral, went on and on. I'm listening to her story. And, I encouraged her. I talked to her. I did more listening, because I knew at that moment, she was in a very vulnerable and just lonely. She just needed someone to listen. And as I listened, I picked up on her story. I picked up that she was in her last year of university, and she was getting ready to graduate, and had to put it on hold to go back for her brother's funeral. She had her plans as far as career plans, So we started talking about some of those plans. And as we started talking about some of those life plans, she kind of lifted up. And I told her what I did, the work I did. She was interested in the work I did. She started to lift up. Her spirit lifted up. Kayla, that girl sent me we connected on LinkedIn. She sent me a message maybe some weeks later and said, thank you so much. She said, me and my brother were so close. I was having thoughts of taking my life when I went back to Belgium. I couldn't bear the pain of losing my brother. She said, your conversation with me was what saved my life.
Yo.
Let me tell you how God
Yo.
works. Thousands of people in that airport, me and this girl sat right in front of each other.
Sat her down right in front of the person who would give her one word.
That's it. But the key thing is just listening to her story. And as you listen to people's stories, some of those life, and when we say life connection, is those things that will come up that they might trigger, not always, but it may trigger a reason to live. That's all life connections is.
Oh, wow. Wow. That is very great for us to understand. So that means we all have to get to the place of just learning how to listen. Because as we're listening, the words that they're saying, you're picking it up, and then you can be able to hang on to the things that will give them hope to live, so that you can now park their and open their eyes.
Because, and Kay, let me say this because I don't want folks to miss this, because there's some cultural implications here when we're talking about this topic.
Jesus, yes.
Very critical. When you're listening to their story is about their story. Take yourself out of it. And what I mean by that, one of our first reaction when we hear that someone wants to die, oh, if you die, what would happen to the children then? The children then, right? So we devalue this person by now putting more burden on them. How can you do this? It's a selfish thing. I know that narrative. Like, we know that people would say those things. It's a selfish thing. Yeah. But in that moment, you're not giving this person a chance to tell their story, how they got to this point. We're totally missing it. You need to be here for these kids. We had a workshop. We did a training just last weekend, 2-day training. And this one young lady shared her story of her experience. And it was powerful, but one of the things that came out of it is, when folks go through that moment, is feeling like you're blamed for feeling the way you're feeling. And it's a selfish thing. And you're not thinking about anybody. You're not thinking about your kids. You're not thinking about your family.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this kind of weird place that everybody is at. It's affecting everybody. And we have to navigate it. But at the end of the day, it is this person, it is their story. It ain't ours. So we have to sit with it as hard as it is our loved one. You have some people who approach suicide differently if it's a professional setting or a loved one. I'll tell you the truth. I've done this for over 20 years. And God forbid, if it's a loved one, I might react differently.
Right.
So I have to be aware of where I'm at with that. If it's a loved one versus, doing it more in a professional setting.
In other words, when you are faced with this spirit, you're not talking to this person per se, you're talking to a spirit that is speaking to you. Don't rush to condemnation. Don't rush to listen first, and it might give you an opportunity to talk this person down the ledge, rather than blame them for they're already feeling guilty for whatever. If they're in that phase of, I'm a burden to these people anyway, so the best thing for me to do is just leave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that is interesting. So now if we go past that stage, now we are in a planning stage, or in the last phase of it, which is the capability.
Yeah, then that's where it's dangerous. That when people get to the
What are we seeing then in that capability
so
stage?
again,
What are we seeing around people?
for someone to fall under the category of having capability, we have to again go back to habits. What are the habituation to pain tolerance? We pay attention to those things in a clinical setting, but again, novice people may not pay attention to that
Of course
unless
not.
you
Yeah.
get that training. But habituation and that fearlessness that you talked about, right? There's this fear, there's this recklessness and this fearlessness of death. They could care less, right? So again, this is theory. So what Joyner is saying, if you have someone who either naturally or through environmental experiences or through a nurture, they have nurtured this habituation to pain and fearlessness, then you put the other two psychological factors in there. That's where suicide happens. So those three things coming together. So the two psychological factors, and then there's this fearlessness, right? So how someone get there is you look at some reckless behaviors. Someone is promiscuous. Someone is that's where drug abuse, substance abuse. Someone who getting behind that wheel and they've had a whole 12 pack of Guinness Stout. They don't care. Right?
Wow.
Those are things though. People who are drunk driving, people who are those habitual habits that we start to see, we might just look at them, this person is just making mistakes or just doing these things. But oftentimes people are suffering. People are dealing with that sense of burden, perceived burdensomeness, and that lack of belongingness. That's where those habits are coming from. So those habits are happening. I'm here drinking, I'm wilding out, I'm promiscuous, I'm trying different things, I'm kind of living on the edge, reckless, don't care. All those things, pain tolerance, I don't care what happens to my body. All those things start happening. That's where suicide happens, right?
That's where if they come to the conclusion to take their lives, it's easy now because they can tolerate pain. They don't fear death. They're careless. Life is too bad anyway. But they've already developed I don't have a sense of belonging anyway. If I leave, nobody's gonna miss me anyway because I'm a burden. So at that conclusion now, if they develop it, and it's interesting that you say that because I was listening to Reverend Christie preach, and she was talking about the addiction. When you hear addiction, you just think, oh, this person addicted to methamphetamine or addicted to the hard drugs. Then you see addiction. But addiction doesn't just get up and come. It is a personality that begins to develop over a period of time when people feeling entitled or you're feeling sorry for yourself and all that stuff. So when that drugs does come, it's easy for the brain to say, go ahead and take it. I mean, who cares anyway? Like, nobody cares about you. So it's so interesting that you said that. And I want to ask a question and then make because every time you speak, I think about my kids because parents to me are the last people to know really or pick up because we're good, we're working, we're taking care of these kids, we're doing the best that we can, where we don't see those signs because we refuse to open our eyes to those signs. Yeah. I'll ask the question later. As you were talking, my son, your nephew, he would when I banned him now from TikTok, social media, and everything, because that's something I did, working, and he'll be on the phone. Now he doesn't go on there because I took every device away from him. Yeah. But when we go to his TikTok, we will see like reposts of suicidal things, reposting of knives, reposting of those kind of dangerous things. There was a young lady who was I at a dinner table, and I think she slit her wrist or something to that effect in front of everybody. And and there was a name for that. And he posted that on his thing as well. So it felt like these kinds of things were becoming common for him. He was embracing it and things like that. As you were talking about the perception of things and getting to the point where you're normalizing these things, I was like, oh wow. Because then it could have come to a point. And then he also talked about suicide on one of his posts. I think it was normal. So as we were talking, I started getting this chill, like, but here's where I want to ask the question: does culture play a role in our receiving or perceiving this, or kind of brushing this off? Because as brilliant as I am, a lawyer who deals with these things, when I saw my son doing this stuff, and I had to go into serious repentance from this, I asked him for forgiveness and I began to pay attention. I was my fussing with him. I didn't ask him. I didn't have a conversation. Why are you doing this? Why is it on here? Why your fascination is with that? I went into complete anger mode. There's nonsense you're doing. If you want kids, I said, go kids.
That's what I'm. Yeah, that's our reaction.
Liberians, mothers, African mothers, and I would like to say that because I've been around them more than the other counterparts. Our reaction is not what you're describing. Everyone kill yourself, go kill yourself.
Yeah.
And not knowing something. So does culture play some role in our perception of these things with these kids?
Man, that's a powerful question. Culture can. It's kind of a two-part way I'm going to answer it. Number one, culture does play some role in kids' exposure to suicide now versus when we were growing up. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, even though it wasn't as pervasive, because one, the lack of social media and awareness. But there are times as a kid that I felt that's perceived burdensomeness and that lack of belonging. So I felt those things back then, but we were in a culture where you couldn't speak freely about it.
That's it.
So as I was moving up and hit college, my college years came, and this personally, I'm self-disclose a little bit. I struggled with like binge drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with binge drinking. Thank God I've been saved. I've been saved by the grace of God. I'm gonna be real, family. I struggle with binge drinking. And there are times that I did have that recklessness. I want people to catch this. I was drinking and driving with no care. So I will ask the question, and I will let y'all come with your own conclusion. I grew up in certain settings and places feeling like this sense of burdensomeness, this perceived burdensomeness. There are times I felt like I didn't belong. So I grew up having these things not able to express. I go off to college where I have access now to freedom. I'm kind of on my own. Now I have this fearlessness that's developing. I have this habituation that's developing. And all of these things are happening to the point that in 2002, I had a major car accident right in Trenton, New Jersey. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
The jaws of life have to come and peel me and pry my car open and get me out. Okay. To this day, I don't remember everything that happened because of how major that accident was. But I'll tell you this. Sometimes I go back and reflect at the moment I had that accident. I try to fight it. I try to put my mind back to that.
Wow, that is deep.
I was drinking. I was depressed. I had this sense of burdensomeness. I had this a sense of not belonging. I those things were there. And then I had this reckless behavior. 2002, ran my car into a building, right? And although cognitively I don't remember everything, but I still ask myself to this day, did I do it on purpose? I'm gonna be real with y'all.
Wow.
I still
That,
ask myself, I got kind of chills saying this out loud, but to
yeah,
this day,
because you never said it loud.
I
Folks,
I
this is a
knew
moment right here.
right.
Wow.
I knew what I was going through leading up to that and how reckless I was moving. And on the outside, everything looked good. That was like my first year working as a school counselor. I got my master's degree. So there was this, like, with all thoughts from the outside looking in, people thought that Bobby Gueh was good. Like, you're doing good. But there were some things that I was dealing with. And at that moment, did I get to the point of running my car into that building? Right? That's, I think, go back to your question, the culture component of what we see with kids today. Mental health, suicide is more pervasive conversation that's open, that's out there. I have parents who come to me and say, Dr. Gueh, they're doing it for attention. I have parents that come to my office and have said that. And what I tell them, I say, look, if they're looking for attention, give it to them. I'd rather you give them that attention and take them to a facility and get the help they need and continue to give them that attention that they want and that they feel instead of them taking their life. Give it to them.
Yeah, comparing it, if you have to compare those two.
Give it to them.
Wow.
You know, so there is a cultural component when it comes to the topic of suicide. I think in our culture, Liberian, African culture, I think now is being more accepted as a thing. You go home now. When I was in Liberia in 2012, 2013, people were openly talking about mental health and talking about suicide. It's not as when we grew up, but I think it's becoming a more, the taboo is starting to shrink a little bit. It's still the stigma there. It's still that stigma there, and our parents, not just African parents. I have parents here, American parents, black families who, when I call them that their child was making these statements and they need to come to the school and talk and process what's happening, they angry. That's as a parent, that's their first instinct.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. You're
first
angry.
instinct.
They're not supposed to feel this way. Why are these kids feeling this way? There was something that you said, and I kind of wanted to go back to it and sort of put a bit of a sticky on there. And that raised the thought about people then who the world perceive as so great. Let's take our mind to the Great Depression. When they started to lose money, those rich people who lost money, stocks, they ended up committing suicide because they couldn't handle the pressure.
Right.
So I don't think good. So then, as you were talking, because all of my life, as I've known you, everybody, because you were the middle child, you fought hard to be at a place where the respect was there. We noticed you did what you had to do. Because Kama was, okay, she's automatically this first child, the golden first child, that does no wrong. And then you got Daniel, who, Daniel's the firstborn son. I mean, by default, that carries in it of itself a privilege. And of course you had envy. So that you worked hard. And I then as you talk now, even though I've never said that, I never really realized it, but it now make me understand why you went into this area, mental health, mentoring people, and all of this stuff. But when you were in college, when you come back, everybody, you are we classified you as astute. You were this. You're brilliant. You know, you love Black culture. Like we put you on this place. You fight, but you have to take yourself there so that we can notice who you are, right? And so when you're talking about the internal demons that are driving you to this reckless behavior, it's I'm now putting the whole picture together that there are the other group of people who nobody would ever assume they would have these kinds of thoughts. I mean, hands down, and you can go shout it out to the police, and they'll be like, "Boy, go home." You know, you are.
Yeah, yeah,
Damn, you got a beautiful home, a beautiful wife. How can you? How can you?
right.
How can you
Yeah,
think that with all of what you have acquired?
yeah,
And we
yeah.
have seen that over and over again. People who have placed themselves, or society have placed them, and they're struggling with the capacity to hold themselves to that place that society has placed them. And sometimes then they end up just taking their lives because the internal demons, they just don't know how to hold in anymore.
So powerful, Kay. And that's it right there. Sometimes that weight of carrying that, even though it looks good from the outside in, just the weight of carrying
The
that
weight of it, oh my God.
alone, it becomes a burden. It becomes, more or less, even though people are celebrating you, you are crying and suffering in silence. You know what I'm saying? So the weight of carrying that. I mean, you look at Robin Williams. You remember the actor Robin Williams?
They were asking Robin Williams.
Robin Williams
Yeah.
here making people laugh every day. That was his job to make. He was Robin Williams, and that
Yeah,
man
ironic.
took his life. Right? He died by suicide. I mean, the list goes on. We have so many people that we can name who, again, the perception was they're good. So oftentimes, and I think Dad used to say this: being at the top, especially as a leader, that's one of the loneliest places that you'll be,
Oh, yes. Yes.
because so much, so many people depend on you. So many people are looking up to you. So there is this kind of reciprocal feeling of, man, I wish I can find someone, to look up to myself and depend on,
Yeah.
as everybody is doing that, to me, or for, looking up to me. So there is that huge group came out. I'm glad you brought that up. And that speaks to the conversation of a lot of our leaders, our clergy, our
That's
ministers,
clergy, especially. They're
clergy.
praying for everybody. Everybody's problems is on them, but when they look back, it's no one there holding them down.
That's right.
No one is there holding a pastor down. No one
That's
is
right.
there praying. No one is there interceding for them. And there they fall down from that pedestal that we put you on. There
That's
they
right.
go into a place of adultery because they're so lonely. Even their
Yeah,
spouse can't hold them up. And they
that's right.
fall into that place. There they make this mistake. Oh my God. And then
Yeah,
wow.
that's right. And it's happening more and more. It's happening more and more. And it's not a conversation we have enough, to
But
provide
Bobby,
us.
sorry to cut you off. The unfairness of it though is if somebody who, let's just say a homeless man, somebody who's been struggling all their lives and they commit suicide, oh, okay, well, if you feel like, oh, it's bound to happen because the way their life is going. And then someone who has put on this brave front and suffered in silence and then does it, then it creates this anger. Like, why would he do that?
That's it.
You know,
That's it.
that,
Because the key thing, nobody took the time to hear the story. That's one of the biggest takeaway that I want for folks. Like, let's listen to people's stories. Like, truly take the time to listen to people's stories, listen to the pain folks are going through, and just stopping and pausing a minute, right? To be able to say, all right, like, what's really going on with this person? Think about, how often we call people and just check up on them, like truly just check up on them.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
And being intentional with some of those people that do a lot of the pouring out. I think it's the perception or misconception that those people are equipped. They're
ah
equipped.
ah.
That's the misconception. They are equipped to be able to handle emotions. They're equipped to be able to manage emotions. So they're good. But then what happened when that person is not good? What happened when that person is not good?
Oh God.
It's
Oh God.
and I've been there. I've been there. I've been there several times.
Oh God. Oh
You know,
God. That is almost scary to hear, and as you talk about it, it's almost like I can feel the burden for these clergy people who are carrying congregations and people, and people have no expectation for them. No, they don't get to talk to nobody because it's a sign of weakness. Why are you
yeah.
complaining? Things like that. And dare you fall out of that line. They look at it as, oh, he fell from grace. No, he was struggling. So probably instead of killing himself, maybe he went into this drugs. And it's not good. I'm not saying it, but as opposed to let me just kill myself and take it, I have to find another coping mechanism. I have to go have this affair and things like that.
Well, and here's the thing, Kay. It brings up the conversation of I was talking to because the training we did last weekend, we actually did it at a church. And this church had some church members there, and I told them, hey y'all, I'm gonna give y'all the 2 C's. And I want y'all to take away the 2 C's, right? Call it C square, Christ and counselor. We need both of them, right? So we need Christ and a counselor. The C square. You need
Yeah,
both.
yeah,
You need
I
both
like
because
that.
we come from a tradition to where the folks said, pray on it, you'll be all right, baby. Just go ahead and just pray. Let's just
Go
pray.
ahead and pray on it, honey. It'll be
Pray,
all right.
pray prayers. And we are witness to that in this family, that prayers work miracles, right? But we
Right.
also need counselors.
Because
So, you know,
what I believe God does is the prayer is going up. And then he says, what, I'm going to answer your prayers. I'm going to answer your prayers through the practicality of this counselor who's going to help you
that's
through
it.
this stuff. That
That's
is
it.
really, and some of these miracles that we see, I'm going to use this doctor to heal you through this surgery or through this.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the training. I don't want to forget. I wrote it down and I really don't want to forget it. Who are we training? You guys have
Gotcha.
been in the trenches. You've been training people. You've been going around the counties in Georgia, training people. Well, we know the professionals are there. But first of all, why did y'all develop the need to start training in the first place? There must have been a precipitated problem or rise of it.
Yep.
And then secondly, who are we training?
Man, great question. So within a year span, I've been trained in this model for several years now. Like I mentioned, it's called Assist. It's out of a organization called Living Works. Living Works, they've been around. They created this model since the 80s. So it's not anything that's just brand new. They've been
Right.
doing this work since the 80s. They're global. And they've trained, we've we've trained over 2 million. There are over 2 million people plus
Wow.
that have this training, that have this a model that they know that could be a life assisting tool, for family, for friends, strangers. I mean, a lot of
Right.
stories go on. So we're in Sugar Hill, Georgia. That's where I worked as a school counselor for 8-9 years. So that's where we live. Within a year time, about a year ago, okay. Right around a year ago, I was called to go out to one of the middle schools here in this community because a seventh grade kid killed himself. 7th grade. About a month or two later, another kid at one of the other local middle schools killed himself and then can you still hear
You
me?
you broke off a bit. The second middle school kid, you say he killed himself.
Got you. So the second middle school died in a car. Middle school now. We're talking about seventh, eighth grade.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
So this is in a year span in our community here. Then last September, 12th grade student who died by suicide, he called 911. He called 911 and said to the dispatcher, "I'm going to take my life."
Oh my
So
God.
they send the authorities to his house, the police to his house. This young man, you know, from what the report says, he charged the authorities with a weapon. We don't know what the weapon was, but they shot him. So death by cops. So within a year time, we had 3 to 4 suicide just in this community. So the mayor of the community reached out to me. He said, "Bobby, we got to do something." And I said, "Well, we do this training at Georgia State University. I would love for us to bring it here in the community." And the local church, some other supporters who started rallying together, and I was able to bring some other trainers that train with me, and we did the first training last weekend at the church. We trained 33 people. Okay, so here's the cool thing: the training is not for mental health workers. It's for
Yes.
lay. It is designed for lay people.
Whoa. Uh-huh.
It is. I had this Oma in my training last weekend. She just came from Nigeria a few years ago. Her English is not the best, but I tell you, that woman's spirit of what she brought to the training and what she was learning, she's going to go back and save lives.
Wow.
So it is for the lay people. It is not clinical. You're not in there. It's not this clinical field. Yes, we add a little bit of theoretical things or frameworks, but it's very, very practical, is very concrete, and is for the lay people. That's what this assist training is. So it's a 2-day training you go through. So it's very intense, 2 days, but we take you through the knowledge of it, of the model, and then we spend the second day like practicing how to do it. And I had one young lady who was in the training. We ended the training 5:30 on Saturday. 9:00 in the evening, she called me that she had to use it on her friend's son and save that boy's life.
You are kidding me. You are
The same day. So,
folks.
and she called me. She's like, "Bobby, like if I didn't have the training," she said the biggest thing that was helpful for her, because we train people on how to ask the question about suicide, because that's one of the biggest hurdles. A lot of people are afraid to ask that. Again, when you're hearing these signs, getting to the point of saying, "Are you suicidal? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of taking your life?" That's a hard thing to ask someone, especially if it's your loved one.
Ask somebody. That's
Very hard thing.
Very, very hard thing.
But the training walk you through on how to ask it, and then how to listen to this person's story, and then come up with some safety plan on how to keep them safe for now. So the process is something we call suicide first aid. So that's the concept, suicide first aid. So It's not about this long, protracted means of saving this person's life. You are just in this space of saying, "Look, I just want to keep you safe for now. Can we agree that you will keep safe for now?" That's it. So it takes some weight and burden off of people who feel like they have to save this person. No. We know from the literature that if someone wants to die by suicide, they're going to do it, right? But as all we can do in that moment is just be this life assisting piece for someone to stay safe for another day, and then pass it off to the professional so they can be able to support them. So anyone, any lay person, I don't care, grandma, mom, uncle, aunt. In fact, we got our next training, we got some barbers and beauticians, some hairdressers coming.
Yeah, we spend time with those people.
You spend time with those people.
We pour ourselves out to our beauticians, our barbers,
bartenders. If you work in a bartender, clergy. This one woman was saying her Uber driver. She shared so much with her Uber driver. I mean,
when Ishmael was traveling, I think he was coming from Texas. He came. He was like, "Yo, okay, I don't know why this woman told me her entire life story, the problems she's going through, this and that." I mean, she poured it, and Ishmael is a great listener. And he really had the natural ability to talk people down the ledge as well. And I think she just had a very nasty divorce. She was feeling depressed. She kind of was speaking on the lines of "I don't belong" kind of thing. And he was able to sort of talk her back into the space to look at her life again as work. But he said the woman will not shut up. She talked, and she was his Uber driver. And talked at 3 o'clock in the morning. She talked the whole way through. So we feel comfortable talking to strangers, pouring out to strangers easily than we do our family members. So you got these churches. So I'm so impressed. I want to really encourage our churches, because pastors now are viewed as first responders, because the members tell them everything first and foremost.
They're all first responders.
Yeah, they're literally first responders. You're hearing these stories first and foremost. Wow. So barbers and beauticians are taking
everyone. And we can train kids as young as 16 years old. So we even have some mechanism to start training some, students in the schools, because the students hear it themselves first too. They hear from their friends.
They're hearing from their friends. Seeing them in the bathrooms. They're seeing them acting. They're seeing them with this erratic behavior. In fact, they're seeing them probably more than anybody's seeing them first and foremost.
That's right. So every person, no matter your background, everybody is qualified for this training. My hope
do they have these trainings around now? What are you hoping that these practical trainings, because most of these training that exists, as you rightfully said, it's for the professionals. If you were to Google it or whatever, they're really for the professionals already.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Saying, listen, we're just trying to bring these lay people because you guys are hearing the stories.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So
what I'll do, Kay, I'll send you some content, and you can spread, in the ministry.
Can you hear me?
Africa.
Can you hear me?
The assist
okay.
Living Works. So Living Works, if folks can put this website down or somehow get it on the screen, Kay, when y'all do livingworks.com.
Living Works. LIVINGWORKS.
Yes. .com.
Okay.
And the assist training, they can find trainings all across the globe on their website.
Okay.
Yep. So there's other research. There's actually other. If you can't do those in-person trainings, there's also other trainings that you can do online. That's on their website as well.
Boom. That's what we're looking
for. Please, make sure you share that website with folks.
Absolutely. So is this something that we can? Okay, of course, I'm not in the field. You guys are in the field. We, like this ministry, can partner with them, and then we invite them to the online training and things like that. We can do that. Is that possible?
Yeah. I mean, folks can you could do the online training independently, or we can work together to try to host something. I mean, folks fly out. I mean,
I'm thinking, we publish it. Maybe one time we can even fly you in because we're local, but then again, most of my people are global, like you
They're
said.
global, right?
Global,
Right.
so they get the benefit of whatever we're gonna have to do. And maybe we can even do not like a Facebook kind of thing. We can do a Zoom. So whoever we invite, those are the people.
Yeah.
A Zoom sort of training
Yeah.
connection with.
And Kay, I would be open to, if not to do the actual. I mean, again, I've been fortunate to be in this for a long time. If not the actual assist training, there's other, because what we do now, even before we do the actual assist training, we do community talks. So just to be able to do this, what we did here for an hour and a half, I could put a presentation together with maybe one of my other colleagues. And if you can get folks on Zoom, we can get on Zoom and we can do an actual presentation on this topic of suicide and suicide awareness.
Yeah, I want to, as we're talking, I want to get the clergy. So what I can do is those who are clergy, only clergies, those people who I know are acting with people, I can put together Zoom invitations for them. We can get up to maybe 30 people, then we can have a conversation about it so that they can learn.
100%. And we could, tailor it for them. We've done that. We've done that. We've been able to do community talks. In fact, we got another one coming up in a few weeks with a group of women. There's a women's group. They invited us to just do a community talk. And then after the community talk, if they choose to do the assist, it's training, then they can register for that. So we would do the clergy talk. And then if they decide that they want to continue on and do the actual training, again, Living Works is across the globe. They will probably be able to find an assist training in their region where they're at.
A question that I wanted to ask at the top of the program, but we went into it towards the ending of the program. But these young people that are killing themselves, what are the reasons?
It's a collection of reasons, Kay. So we have Joyner give us that framework to look at. So the framework of perceived burdensomeness and thwarted belongingness. We have those frameworks.
Theoretical principles. But when you hear the story, I said those are the theoretical principles.
Correct.
What are the practical reasons that you're hearing?
And that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. You have those frameworks, but underneath the framework, that's where things are happening. So what our kids are going through is intense our kids are going through this identity crisis, okay? I'm gonna say it again. Our kids are going through identity crisis. They don't know who they are. They don't know whose they are. So whatever they're seeing on social media, the messages of you're not good enough, the message of you don't belong. So social media have captured and captivated our kids. So you have kids who are going through severe depression because of what they're seeing on social media and comparing themselves to what they're seeing. So you have social media. Again, there's a level of good that comes out of social media, but for our babies who mentally they're not developed yet, their brains are not developed yet. As adults, we can navigate social media. We can see those things and we'll be okay. Even though some of us are going through some of our stuff, when we pay attention to social media. So imagine those babies, their frontal lobe has not developed yet. The executive function of their minds. So they're getting inundated with various social media campaigns. That's one. The other piece that we are seeing in various areas, there's a transfer of generational, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Whoa. Somebody in that generation that committed suicide. The spirit is just there. Like we're not going nowhere.
It's there. there's a transfer of generational trauma that have not been met, that have not been dealt with, that have been passed from grandma to mom to dad, and now to these babies. So now we are in the schools, we're working with these kids, and we think that these are just arbitrary behaviors. No, let's do the history. When we drag in the history with some of these kids and their families, when they come to the school, I'm saying, okay, this is why this kid is behaving the way they're
I see
behaving.
the connection. I see the
This is
connection.
why this kid don't want to live no more. You know, so there's the generational trauma that is happening to some of our babies, that getting them to the point of wanting to take their lives. You know, so you have this impact of social media, you have generational trauma. Kids are feeling, you know, the kids that I've dealt with, they get to that point because of also, again, the bullying. You know, we use that term bullying that comes up, the being picked on, all those things. Again, they fall underneath this umbrella of not feeling like they belong. Kids being picked on to the point that they want to take their life. You know, imagine that. They get picked on to the point that they want to end their life. They can't take it anymore. They can't take it anymore. That's real.
Nobody listening to them, especially for the males. Why are you letting somebody talk to you like that? Snap back.
Toughen up.
Stop crying. Go ahead and do this back.
Yeah, toughen up. That's what we tell them. Easier said than done when you got to go to school every day and face that.
Face that bully.
Yeah.
And face that bully. I'm so happy that you guys have opened it up for children like 16, 17, 18, because they really can be a turning point for their peers. It's easier for an adult to talk to a child. No, for us to say this, but another child reaching another child, it's powerful because they're seeing this thing raw. I want to. You and I talked about a story in the Bible, and we talked about that. So I'm going to bring that up in our conclusion. Like, we got a few more minutes, but I want us to hint on this. We're talking about what kind of biblical trends about suicide. Where was the first? Where did this idea started? And you brought up about Job and his wife, and you hinted so much on this whole trauma that she was going through. As a result of the trauma, and because he was the recipient of the curse or whatever, everybody's dying. She told him to curse God and just die. She knew that if he curses God, he's gonna die. Like, we already know that, because that's Yahweh, that's Almighty God. You curse him, you die. And then the question was, how did she arrive at that point to tell him to kill himself? Because that's pretty much what she was saying. Just go ahead and kill yourself. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on how you broke that down for me. And I was like, yo, that is
okay. Because when you think about suicide and how it looks, so there's some other stories of suicide happening in the Bible, right? And we looked at a few of them. You have Saul, who was at the end and he fell on his sword, right? You have Judas Iscariot. That man hung himself. Couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle it. A lot of guilt, a lot of shame. He couldn't handle it. Those incidents are a little different. They're kind of situational in the sense that, these men were in a situation where they did wrong, in a sense. If you look, both of those stories, they did wrong and they felt that guilt. So it's kind of like a situational thing. Job's wife, on the other hand, it's a little different because she was experiencing.
And she could have died too, because she knew that husband was covering her. When she said, "You curse, gonna die," she probably in her mind was prepared that she's gonna die too.
Oh, she was, because she said, "We can't live like this. We can't do this anymore." Our children are gone, our livestock are gone, our servants. I mean, everybody is dying. We're losing everything. So she's going through all this trauma, and she gets to the point of saying, you know what? just curse God and die. So when I look at Job's wife and juxtapose that story to our modern concept of suicide, her saying, just curse God and die. In translation, if we move her to this time, that's for me, is her saying, Bobby, I want to kill myself.
Oh, yo,
Curse God and die.
That's a revelation right there.
Curse God and die. Translation, I want to kill myself. That's where Job himself started to have he became the person that intervened and reminded, of despite it all, we're still going to serve our God. Despite it all, he was the one reminding his wife. But he had to get to that point to be able to be the witness for God, to be the witness for her to see God in him and God orchestrating in him. And that's so in essence, Job was the person who provided that life assisting intervention. Talk to me. Job provided that life. Job was the one that started to create this turning point. Job was the one that said, I'm going to provide this intervention, and the intervention is our Almighty God. In spite of it all, in spite of what's happening to us, in spite of what's happening to us.
Yeah, you hit me with that one.
So if we can juxtapose that story to our present day conversation about suicide and mental health, her saying that she's at a point and curse God and die, for me, that's her saying that she wanted to end her life.
Yeah, let's just
so let's just end it all. So and that was it's fascinating. That story is especially, because oftentimes when we read that story, we read it from the purview of Job, and we wonder, why would she even say that? Like, she's heart like, and again, let's come to today's time when people say they want to end their life. No, our reaction, like, why would you say that? Why would you even, say that about taking your life? You have things, or you should want to live. I can't tell this person if they should want to live or not. That's something they have to come to a conclusion for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just a fascinating story.
It really was.
In how it truly brings up our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, even in the midst of everything that we're going through, even in the midst of that darkness, even in the midst of that quiet pain when we're feeling through the night that no one understands, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ will be there for us. And Lord, and again, I'm a proponent, I'm a supporter of Christ and counselor, right? C squared. So Jesus, God put professionals in our lives to be able to support us, to be able to help us, to be able to get us back to prevailing in this life. So,
so that just tells me that the response to trauma is not a new concept.
Absolutely not, Kay.
That woman was responding to trauma. Not. She has lost everything. Because they say, the Bible would say Job lost children, cattle, but because she is his wife, she lost it too. And the Bible did not account for her feelings or how she would feel about losing her children that she gave birth to. Yes. And her response to that trauma is, I don't need to be living. If you curse, she knew that she told her husband, because the husband was the head. So he cursing God, we both are going. And the only reason why that her life was spared is because of the covenant he has with her. They're in that one covenant. So God couldn't take her. That means he has to take Job out too. So he has to honor covenant, the marriage covenants. Okay, I let him live, I let you live. But it just tells me that we respond to the response to trauma is there from the beginning of time.
It's
Is
there.
there now. That pain still exists the way as I said,
It's not
and
new.
we still respond to it as that woman respond to it.
100%. That's well
You killed
said.
me with that.
Oh my
Yo.
goodness. Oh my goodness. It's still that response to trauma is still the same. I think we need to dig into that story a little more because it is a great picture and a mirror of what a lot of people are dealing with. Curse God and die.
And
You know,
just die. Like, give up on him.
and
We're
give
not
up.
gonna pray for him anymore. We're not gonna do this anymore. Wow, that is deep. So before let's end with this. What is the difference between having ideologies of suicide and suicidal thoughts? Like actually carrying it out. I remember the
So
reason why I bring it up is I remember I was in the hospital with my middle child, no, the last girl, and I was going through so much life situation that I was like, God, you might as well take me then. I don't know if like the emotional pain was so much in my mind that if I was gone, I thought that I came to that place that if he took me now, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't mind. Like I'd rather not be here. Of course, I didn't do anything to go there.
yeah.
So how are we able to distinct it when someone says stuff like that? Because I said it out aloud, then that can alarm somebody to say, "Oh, let me talk further to her." Or you know what I mean? I don't know. You understand why I'm trying to go with it? Like, what is the difference between the ideologies
Yeah,
thinking it?
yeah, yeah. No, number one, Kay, thank you for your transparency just to share that out loud. I think
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the conversation that all of us at one point in our lives have had those thoughts, of wanting to give up, and however that looks for us. So ideation and thoughts are pretty much the same. So what I mean, when someone have an ideation, that means that they're having these thoughts of wanting to die. That means that they're thinking about it. That means that they're making statements like you made, right? God, I'm going through so much. If it happens, I'm fine with it. You almost come into that you're reconciling the feeling and the emotions of I'm okay if I die. You have reconciled with that, and that's a dangerous place to be.
That's a dangerous place to be.
But I keep going back to the model because Joyner says the capability piece that wasn't there for you.
Nah.
You see what I'm saying? That's why it's so important with that component of
No.
capability. Well, yeah, there was the fearlessness of death wasn't there for you. You still scared a little bit. Still scared a little bit. So it's good to be scared of death. But yeah, so it's the suicide ideation. When we say ideation, those are the ruminating thoughts of wanting to die. Got it? Then is the suicide action. So it's the ideation versus the action. The action is where folks actually attempt. So the action is where people have no fear no more. The action is where people are to a place where there's this habituation of pain, no fear, this fearlessness, this risky behaviors. So that's where you're getting to action. So again, ideation can happen when someone just kind of hit rock bottom. People can have ideation if they lost their jobs, they lost, a sense of who they are. And it's a whole nother layer of this that we haven't even brought up, Kate, is the elders, our citizens. The suicide rate for citizens have skyrocketed. Yes, a real thing. You have seniors who are now killing themselves, dying by suicide. 60, 70 years, they've lived most of their life. Some of these people, they're not working anymore. They're retired. Their kids are grown and gone. No one is checking on them. So you're talking about loneliness. Our citizens probably experience more loneliness than any group of people. Hence,
Hey,
the rates of suicide in that community is increasing by leaps and bounds, but no one is talking about it.
no one is talking about it. No one is talking about this
Absolutely.
conversation. And that means we got to continue this conversation and get on another show because my goal now, hearing it and even listening to you and then putting my son, although like I said, I stepped in once it clicked. I think it was just the Holy Spirit that clicked. Like, no, don't react to him that way. And
Right.
then I started, but it is now critically important
Critical
to
K.
have this conversation across the board.
Critical K.
It's so important to have this conversation.
Unfortunately, we're at a place where we're at a emergency state where we have to normalize the conversation of suicide.
Hey, Lord,
We have to normalize it because we are at that state of emergency.
so
And
we definitely gonna have this conversation again, moving into that piece of hearing what the senior citizens are going through.
yep,
Especially those ones that they're bringing from another country, and all they're doing is sitting
sitting home,
sitting
sitting home.
home. We have our old man that come in to
Yeah,
visit, just sitting down. They don't have any other life. They're just
yeah,
sitting
no
home.
sense
So
of identity. Yeah, all those things start to seep in, and that's and that's what the enemy uses. The enemy uses that
oh,
to speak those self-deprecating thoughts
no doubt, no doubt.
in someone's mind. When you talk about your situation, I talk about my situation. It was the enemy, speaking
Of
that.
course, no doubt, no doubt in that moment.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, it was created by him. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's I'm going to move in. I mean, God has nothing to do with the creation of suicide. It's the enemy's game. It's one of his lies that he tell you that you don't belong, you're not
you don't
good enough,
belong. Right, right.
not good enough to be on this earth. But see, that's why I always say the devil, the first thing he does before he gets you on strike, he lies to you. He has to tell you you don't belong, you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough. Once that thought hits, anything else goes and stuff like that. Well, we have come to the end, but it's not the end. Like, I really want to continue this conversation, but I want people to get it, enjoy it, and be able to come back. You know how our attention span is. You go anything over 2 hours, they're like, okay, let me go. And like that, learning stops. Nobody wants to listen to these kind of things, but it was very interesting conversation. We will bring you back. Daniel is coming on next week.
Awesome.
It's going to be a heavy hitter. And
Ooh.
I have him coming up. And then I think I have some other people. And then Dad, I have him as a lineup coming up. So we can get you back on because I want to finish the conversation. Well, this conversation cannot be finished. So we need to keep doing it from time to time.
100%.
So that people, but I want you to tell whatever last thing you want to tell people, encourage people, really put this hammer now on this nail. What should we be looking for? What should we be alert of? What should we be doing proactively to help our children?
Man, number one, we start with prayer. We start with intentional prayer. And when I say intentional prayer, we have to pray intentionally and for God to truly protect our children from the enemy attack, particularly on their mental health. Prayer intentionally for the enemy attack that our kids are facing on their mental health. And when it comes to their mental health, they're then losing their identities. They're then losing their sense of belonging. They're feeling like they're a burden. So if we're not praying intentionally for those things, we're missing the shot. So intentional prayer for our kids and their mental health. The other piece is being intentional in asking the question. I cannot tell you hundreds of people we've trained. The hardest thing is for us to ask that question. Are you suicidal? Ask the question. Ask the question. Because some folks might be at a point where they do want to give up, But the mere fact you ask them, they will feel like someone at least sees them and hear them.
And then, sorry, then you have exposed the enemy's plan because this is a secret thing. That's how they get you. You've opened up.
Ask the question, Kay. You've exposed the enemy just by asking the question. Just by asking the question. So ask that question. If you feel like the student, your children are withdrawn, they come home, they just go in their room, they lock their doors, they're not around the family anymore. Those little things to look for. When kids start to withdraw, those are signs. When your spouse start to withdraw, those are signs. When your loved ones start to withdraw, no one knows what's going on, the signs are there. So just paying attention to those little things, which are, definitely big things, but we miss them because we're in this Western society where everything is hustle and bustle. It's a rat race that we're in. So I want to leave them with those two things: intentional prayer, and just pray for the strength to being able to ask that question, because it's a very hard thing to do.
It's a hard thing to do. Dr. Gueh, my brother, my roommate.
I love.
Given me. I love. Mama, your chin, you
see, I had to bring my naked chip. I got his bees on.
I got wear bees on me. When I saw it, I said, yeah, got chin,
I got his bees on. I got to put his holy bees on.
He coming to drop. The wise people of the society.
Right. They got put his bees on. He can't talk. I love you, baby.
I love you too. I appreciate you. God bless you. And we'll bring you back again. Everyone, please help me thank Dr. Gueh. This was inspiring.
Peace out, family.
We love it. Watch the show, share it. You can save a life. Just like that woman who took the training, and the same day she had to use that training, you can save a life. Next time, we will bring more information about this. Stay tuned and share it. God bless you. This is the Real Talk from Dr. King.
Amen. Y'all be safe. Bye-bye. Take care of each other.
I will. Bye-bye.